Welcome to Afternoon Art Club for 4th through 6th graders. I'm Miss Kim. I'm glad to see you all back today. Today, for the month of March, we are going to be beginning a brand new project. So I hope that last month you were able to finish up your paper sculptures, and I would love to have a photograph of those paper sculptures. If you would take a picture and email them to me, I can't wait to see what you've created with your paper sculptures. Let's go ahead and get started with this month's activity. So this month we're starting to talk about something completely new. We're going to be using different supplies today than we have been using for our last two projects, and it's a completely different type of topic. So for January and February, we made two different types of sculpture projects each month. But this is going to be a two-dimensional project. So we're going to be learning about and talking about landscapes today. Now, you might be familiar with landscape paintings, so we're going to be taking a look at some of those. We've got some more friends joining us here. So if you have not finished your paper sculpture, you can keep working on that. You just have to send photographs of it to me by the end of March. So you have until the end of March to finish up your clay pot, your coil clay pot, your paper sculpture, and your landscape painting, which we're going to be starting today. So you have a little bit of time. If you haven't finished it, it's not an emergency. You don't have to finish it right away. Or maybe you made something that you're not completely happy with, and you will maybe want to try again or add to it or do something to make it a little bit different. If you missed any of our paper sculpture lessons, you can go back and watch those on YouTube. So we post these classes to YouTube. If you missed the February classes with the paper sculpture, you can watch the video recordings of those lessons. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share a PowerPoint with you. We're going to talk a little bit about paper sculptures to begin with. And very similar to last week when we stopped and talked, I paused the video recording and we talked about the artworks. I'm going to leave a little bit of time for that today. Some of the time I'm going to be asking you to look closely at a few artworks and see what you notice, see if we can make some observations about these artworks that we're looking at, and learn to talk a little bit about landscapes. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so that you will be able to see my PowerPoint. Let me go ahead and pull that up. And here we go. All right, guys, so you should be able to see that. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my chat box here. So I have that available. Remember that if you have questions, please ask them in the chat box. I am going to give you an opportunity. You are going to have an opportunity to ask those questions with your voice as I pause the video, but as long as the video is not paused, then please put your questions in the chat box. All right, so today we're learning about landscapes, and I'm excited to talk about landscapes because there's so many different types of landscape paintings that you can really take what we talk about today and apply it to any of the landscape type paintings that you see. So let's go ahead and jump right in, I think. Here we go. Okay, so what is a landscape? That's a big term, and it can be used to talk about a lot of different types of paintings. So you might have something that's a landscape, and it's also called a seascape or a cityscape. Any of those terms with the scape at the end really can all be classified as landscapes. So a landscape is just a painting or a drawing of scenery. Most often this is outdoor scenery. So we're looking at an example of a landscape painting right in front of us. This landscape painting is by William Henry Johnson. Now, the Florence County Museum has a lot of paintings and drawings and prints by William Henry Johnson. And he's really important to us here at the museum because he was born here in Florence. William Henry Johnson was an African-American artist born right here in 1901. And actually, this month is his birthday. He would have been 120 years old on March the 18th. So we're getting ready to celebrate his birthday here at the museum. So let's go back to landscapes a minute. So landscapes can include natural scenery, so things that are naturally found outdoors, things like trees or mountains or flowers. Anything like that could be in a landscape. You might see an ocean in a landscape, things that have a painting that is of the ocean or of the sea or of a lake, for example. We might call that a seascape, just to be a little bit more specific. So it may be called a seascape. Now, landscapes don't have to just include natural things. Landscapes can also include man-made scenery. So they could include things like buildings or roads or houses. And if it's a painting or a drawing of a city, for example, we would call that a cityscape. Now, that's just another type of landscape. Now, if you guys participated in Afternoon Art Club in the fall, I think in the month of October, we worked together to draw a cityscape. So that should sound pretty familiar to you. So all of these are different types of landscapes. Now, so you've seen one example of a landscape. We're going to dig in a little bit deeper and look at some of the details about landscapes. So let's move on to our next slide here. Now, there are 4 distinct parts of a landscape that we're going to be looking for today. So as we look at landscapes today, I'm going to ask you to be a little bit of a detective and to look closely at these paintings to try to find these 4 parts of a landscape. So the first thing we're going to be looking for is the horizon line. Again, if you were with us in October, then you are familiar with that term. The horizon line is where the sky meets the earth. So if you were to look outside right now, you should be able to find the horizon line outside where the sky meets the ground. Hold on, I'm going to add a friend here that's joining us. So the horizon line is something that you should be familiar with if you did Art Club in October with us. But if not, again, it's a very simple idea. That line in a landscape where the sky meets the earth is called the horizon line. Now, there are 3 areas of a landscape that we need to be able to identify: the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. And an artist can use foreground, middle ground, and background to show us a sense of space. So what I mean by that, I don't mean outer space. I mean that the artist can show us that we're looking at things that are very, very close to us and things that are very, very far away from us. And artists can use tricks to create the illusion of depth in an artwork. So I'm going to show you what some of those tricks are today, and we are going to locate in some paintings the foreground, which is the area that looks like it's closest to us, the middle ground, which is the area that's in between the foreground and the background, and then the background is the area that's the farthest away from us. So these 4 parts of a landscape, horizon line, foreground, background, and middle ground, are all areas we're going to locate in the landscape paintings we look at today. And they're also things we're going to add to our own paintings. So we're going to add foreground, middle ground, background, and horizon line to our own paintings that we create. So let's get to it. When we look at landscapes, I want you to ask yourself about the things that I just mentioned. Where's the horizon line? Where's the foreground? Where's the middle ground? Where's the background? But I also want you, when you're just looking, when you first see a painting, whether it's a landscape painting or any kind of painting really, the first thing you should really think about is, what do you notice? When I look at this painting, what is something that I notice about it? So I just want you to take a moment and look here at the painting in front of us. This painting is called Sunset Landscape. It's by an artist named Edmund Lewis. So look closely at this painting and and I'm going to pause in just a moment and ask you some questions. So just for this moment, before I pause it, I want you just to look closely at the painting and ask yourself, what do I see here? What is happening in this painting? What do I see? Then ask yourself, what landscape features do you see? So if I'm looking at this landscape painting, do I notice a foreground? Do I notice things in the painting that are very close to me? Do I notice a middle ground, an area where things are kind of in the in-between? And do I notice things in the background, all the way very, very far away from me? What does this landscape tell you about the location? When you look at this landscape, do you know where you are? And I'm going to pause in just a minute and give you a chance to talk with me about this, but I just want, for the video, I want to make sure that all this kind of discussion questions are here for anyone who might be watching. So what does the landscape tell you about the location? Do you have a sense of where you are when you look at this? Do you have a sense of what the weather's like? What time of year it might be? Are there clues in the landscape that give you information about what time of year it might be? What do you see that's the closest in the painting? What do you see that's the farthest away in the painting? And how can you tell that something's far away or close? So I'm gonna pause the video recording right now. And I'm gonna let you guys unmute yourselves so that, whoops, I'm gonna actually stop sharing here a second. And then I'll reshare so that I can pause the recording. Okay, guys, you've made great observations about this painting by Edmund Lewis. Let's take a look at another painting. Now, this painting is by an artist named William Halsey, and we might call this landscape a seascape because we're looking at a scene of Charleston Harbor. So we're looking at boats on the water. Now, I want you to look closely at this painting. First of all, remember, just like we did last time, we're going to take a moment and just look closely at the painting and ask ourselves, what's going on here in this painting? What am I looking at? So take a moment and just think about that. See if you can identify anything. Is there anything there that you recognize? Can you identify things that are in the foreground or closest to us? Things that are in the middle ground? And things that are in the background or farthest away from us? See if you can notice maybe what time of year it is or what the weather is like in this landscape. It can kind of set the scene for us. All right, and now I'm going to pause the video one more time and we're going to talk for just a moment about this painting. All right, so when we look at this is the last painting we're going to look at today. One other thing that I want to show you, because we've talked a little bit about how artists use tricks to help people understand what's in the foreground and what's in the middle ground and what's in the background. So, for example, we said that an artist can use size to tell us what's in the foreground. The things in the foreground usually appear the largest. So an artist might use the size of something to show us that it's closer or farther away. In this painting, for example, if we look all the way in the background, This scene might look familiar, and I'm going to ask you guys to talk about it in a minute. But the things in the background, these buildings look very, very tiny. But the people and the plants in the foreground look very large. They look much larger. And we know that people and plants are probably smaller than these buildings. So that's one way. The size of something is one way that an artist shows us that something's in the foreground, middle ground, or background. We also talked about how an artist can use overlapping. So they might put something like this tree, for example, is in front of these trees. So we know that this tree is closer to us because it's overlapping. So that's another trick that an artist uses. Now, the last way that an artist kind of shows us foreground, middle ground, and background on a flat surface or makes it look three-dimensional is by moving up the paper. So the things at the very bottom are usually the things that are closest to us. So these are normally going to be the things in the foreground. And if we move up to the middle of the paper or the canvas, right in the middle is normally our middle ground area. And then we normally have sort of our horizon line. You can see where the sky sort of meets the land right in here as the horizon line. And then in the background, that's the highest part of the paper. We're at the very top of the paper when we get to the background. So that's how an artist kind of shows us space. They move up the paper. As we move up the paper or up the canvas, it's further and further and further back in space. So that's one way that an artist uses a trick to help us understand foreground, middle ground, and background. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about this painting before we move on. This painting was done by John Ross Key. The title is View of Washington, D.C. So this may be something that if you've ever been to Washington, D.C., you may be familiar with this. John Ross Key was actually a relative of a man named Francis Scott Key. You might recognize that name as Francis Scott Key was the author of the Star-Spangled Banner, our national anthem. So John Ross Key was a relative of Francis Scott Key, and he did this wonderful painting of this landscape of Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. So I'm going to pause the recording a moment here, and let's talk about it. Okay. You guys have done a wonderful job looking at landscape paintings and talking about landscape paintings today. And I hope that as you kind of go throughout the next few weeks, that you'll notice some of these things maybe in artwork, but also in real life. So if you go outside, just take a look around and notice how the things that are the closest to you look the largest, and the things that are very, very far away look very tiny. So that's something that you can observe. And I see that at least one of you has been to Washington, D.C. So I bet that some of you have been to D.C. and maybe seen some of those sites that we saw. I'm breaking up. Can everybody hear me? Am I breaking up? Can you hear me? All right. Okay, good. I hope I'm not breaking up too bad. I'm sorry if I am, if I'm breaking up. All right, guys. I got some thumbs up, so I think I'm okay. If I am breaking up, then just hang tight with me. Hopefully it'll clear up in just a minute. Okay, so I'm going to share my desktop with you, and I want to go over with you what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks and just get you started on the very first steps in creating our project. So we're just going to do a quick sketch today and talk about how to build a landscape painting. So let me go ahead and share my desktop screen. Hopefully it's going to work easy for us today. Is it going to come up? Not exactly. Let me hold on one second. Let's see if I can get it to do what I want it to do. It always is a little finicky. Oh. All right, it's gonna be a little wonky. We're gonna try one more time. And see if we can get it to do right. I don't know why it always wants to skew, but it does today. Let's see. All right. Okay, well, I'm gonna try it one more time here. I may just use my camera so it doesn't skew because I want you to see it accurately. All right. Okay, guys, I'm gonna zoom in a little and just kind of lock my focus. I know this isn't exactly what it's not the best way to show you, but we're gonna go with this today. All right, guys, so we are going to be creating a landscape painting. Now, you're gonna start out with just some really basic supplies and materials. Let's see if I can tone that light down a little bit. Oh, that's not that, okay. Let's see here. All right. Sorry, just trying to get it to focus. Okay, that's a little better. That's a little more reasonable. Okay, so guys, we are going to be doing a landscape painting. Now, what you're gonna need to start this project are just basic materials. So I just have white paper. If you got a kit from us at the museum, then you have white paper in your kit. I have a pencil that also came in your kit if you picked up a kit from us. I like to keep a spare eraser handy because I do a lot of erasing and sometimes I run out of eraser on my pencil. So if you have one, that's fine, but your pencil eraser should work fine as well. I just like to keep that handy when I'm drawing so that I have that nearby. Now, this is going to be a painting, but I want to start out by doing a sketch. Now, you might want to do a sketch that you like that's a practice drawing and then use a whole new sheet of paper for your painting. Or you might want to just paint right over your sketch. And that's going to depend on how much erasing you did or, if you moved the position of something in your sketch. A sketch is really just a preparatory or a planning kind of drawing. It's kind of a rough draft. It's not meant to be your final artwork. So we are going to add all of the 4 components of a landscape that we talked about. We're going to add foreground, middle ground, and background. So the first thing I'm going to do is add some things in my foreground. Now you'll remember that I told you that one way that an artist uses that space is by starting at the bottom for the things that are closest to you. And as we move up the paper, we're getting farther and farther away from ourselves. So if we want to draw a tree that is really close to us, we wouldn't start that up here. We would start it down here. Okay, so remember that. Now, what I'm going to do first in my sketch is just go ahead and start putting in the parts of my landscape. Now, this can be a landscape that you've imagined, something that's in your imagination. It could be a landscape from somewhere that you've visited. If you've been to a really cool park or you went on a hike and you saw some really beautiful landscape scenery, you could use something like that. If you have a photograph, you could use a photograph as inspiration, or you could look right out your window and see what's outside of your window that you could use in your landscape. So it does not have to be, it doesn't have to be a whole lot of, it doesn't have to be all imagination. It doesn't have to be all real. Someone asked if they could use colored pencils. Yes, you can absolutely use colored pencils. You can use whatever you have. So I'm going to be using a pencil to do my drawing with today. And next week, we're going to be adding some paint to the top of it. But if you don't have paint and you don't want to use paint and you want to use colored pencils to add color, that's totally fine as well. This is your artwork. So whatever you have available to you is going to work wonderfully. All right, so let's go ahead and add some things in our foreground. So I'm gonna add just some grass down here at the bottom. Remember, the things in our foreground are larger than the things in our background. Now, we don't want grass that's as tall as our head, right? Because that's not how tall grass is in real life. But I'm gonna draw it. I'm not gonna draw it little teeny tiny. I'm gonna kind of give it a little bit of height to it. This is grass that hasn't been cut in a while. And I'm just doing kind of like a zigzag line to make grass. And this is a sketch, so I'm just going kind of fast. I'm not even trying to go really, really slow. So there's my grass, just down at the bottom. It's kind of big for grass, right? But remember, things in the foreground are larger. Now, I also want to have a tree in my foreground. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my tree. I'm going to put my tree trunk in here. And if you'll notice, I didn't put the line of my tree in front of my grass. I didn't put it right over the top of it. When I got to my grass, I stopped and then I started again because I want it to look like my grass is in front of my tree. So I drew it like that. And then I'm just going to kind of draw a really organic looking tree here. If I don't like the way it looks, I can just erase. That's why I keep my handy eraser near me, so I can always erase. So just a really simple tree. This does not have to be, this is just a sketch that I'm making. So it doesn't have to be perfect. So I've got my tree sketched in. I might want to change the way these lines look a little bit. I can do that now, or I can do that later. But there's my tree. That is in the foreground. It's close to me. The tree's kind of large. I've got my grass down here at the bottom. So now I'm just going to fix the way that looks a little bit because I want my grass to really look like it's in front. There we go. All right. So now I have my tree and my grass in the foreground. Now I want to put some things in the middle ground. Now in the middle ground, I want to have maybe a little hill, kind of just a gently rolling hill like that. You'll notice my hill kind of stops here. It doesn't come all the way down to the bottom. And I want to have another one that kind of goes behind my tree like that. Now remember, because the tree is in front, I didn't put my line through the tree. I stopped when I got to the tree and then moved my pencil over. And that makes it look like the tree is in front, right? All right. Okay, now, and again, you can keep just kind of redrawing your lines if you don't like the way that something looks, but that's kind of my middle ground. Now I want to go ahead and put my horizon line in, and I want it to be right around the middle of my paper. I'm going to draw it in because what I really want is for this area right here to be kind of like a river. So that's going to be water right here, kind of looking into this over the hills or this little river back here. So this is my middle ground. In the middle ground, I have some hills and I have some water, like a little river going by. And it's a little bit difficult to see because I don't have any color or texture in here to kind of show us what we're looking at. So what I have right now is just lines. This is just really simple sketch, a really simple sketch. And in the background, I'm going to add some mountains, okay? So I might want those mountains to kind of be like this. And then I might even want some other ones behind that. So I can just kind of draw these in. Just some mountains in the background. There's my mountains back here. And then I could even draw some back farther. I could even draw some other hills. And I could even have like like a little building up here, like a little house, a really small one, or a castle or something up on the hill. So this is just a sketch. So I'm just kind of putting in some lines. I'm not trying to make everything perfect. These lines are just helping me get my ideas down for my landscape. So I have a foreground, a middle ground, a background, and a horizon line. I'm using some overlapping, so some things in front of other things. And I'm using size. So this tree is much bigger than my building back here. So I'm using size. So someone asked, could they do a pond? Yes, you can do whatever you want. This is your landscape. So it could be a pond. You could have a lake. You could have a river. You don't have to have water at all. Here's another example of one I drew out earlier, just another little sketch I drew earlier. So again, as you move up, you're getting farther and farther into the distance, okay? So your job for this week is just to draw out your landscape sketches. So you just need kind of something like this, a line drawing. You don't need to add color to it yet. We're not adding paint or color. I'm going to teach you next week a special painting technique, but you could also use a technique that's similar for colored pencils or crayon or marker or whatever it is you're going to be using. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see me now. All right, guys. So I hope that you've enjoyed learning a little bit about landscapes. It was really fun to talk with you today and let you kind of give me some feedback about these paintings. You know, I think it's really important for us to stop and talk about artwork in Afternoon Art Club, because we learn about art by looking at the artwork of others. We learn how to talk about it. We learn how to make it ourselves by looking at a lot of artwork. So I was excited to get to show you some of the artworks that you can see right here at the Florence County Museum. All the works that we looked at today are in the museum's collection, so you can see those at the museum. I enjoyed talking with you today. For next week, work on your landscape line drawing. So we're just getting sketches down. They don't have to be finished paintings. Practice sketching. Use the front and back of your paper. Use a scrap of paper. Maybe do several different landscapes. Look outside and see what kind of landscape you could do, or look at a painting, or look at a picture online, maybe with the help of your parents. So there's lots and lots of landscape inspiration to be found. Think about what you as an artist are going to do for your landscape artworks. And I will see you guys again in 2 weeks. So that will be March the 16th. I'll see you again on March 16th. That's 2 weeks from today. I've enjoyed talking to you guys. I'm going to stop the recording, and then if you have any other questions, you're welcome to answer them. Thanks so much, guys.